Cross-Cultural Communications, and Dr. Krishnamurthy Sriramesh on Spirituality and Religion and CSR.
Thanks for Dear Morgan's introduction. 2 years ago, I worked at GIS for 5 months, so I think this is an unforgettable memory. My ability to listen is poor, but I will say my presentation in English. If you have any questions, I will speak in Chinese. Now, today my topic is cross-cultural communication and self-awareness. I think with the development of information technology and all-round expansion of international relations, cross-cultural communication have received more attention. We can say soft power or smart power based on the hard power have become an important topic. I think the cross-cultural communication not only contributes to the progress of disciplinary construction, but also promotes the internationalization of academic exchanges and development of multicultural differences. But I think when we concentrating on the Sino-US cross-cultural communication, I believe self-awareness should be focused and studied. This is my outline, can divide it in 3 parts. 1, self-awareness in the context of internationalization. 2nd, self-awareness in language transplant. 3rd, looking for objectivity and self-awareness. And then when compare with some pictures to express my viewpoints. These are 2 pictures. In the left hand, we can say a photo from Starbucks in the center of Shanghai. You know, Xintiandi. When students visit Shanghai, you will see this place. And right hand, we can say foreign friends will perform the art of tea in the tea houses. In my viewpoints, I would say 6 years ago, we can find 114 stores in Shanghai, 14 Starbucks stores. Today, I think the figure must exceed this figure. But now in this year, we also find 510 tea houses in Shanghai. We find this figure from 114 Life Network. Although I think these tea houses can better to Chinese taste with drink menu and refreshment gradually become more diverse. But I think the popularity and influence are still dwarfed by Starbucks. What I mean is American business and culture have great influence in China, especially in Shanghai. Those are also 2 pictures. In the right hand, we can say Chinese Spring Festival in the Times Square in New York. In the right hand, we can say Chinese martial art have received attention from the United States. So we also can see control interaction. And we find many Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas are not festivals, and also festivals of China and Shanghai. 2 years ago, I visited Amish country. I was shocked by the way of living that Amish people in the United States, their peaceful, simple life, without electricity or limited use technology. Just as near Shanghai, we can find some very small town, just like this one, Zhujiajiao, during Shanghai district. It's also Shanghai, near Shanghai, the small town, Fengjing town. So I think this peaceful life is similar as Amish country, the peaceful, the simple life. So, comparison this different phenomena, I think globalization has become a reality, taking place in great depths. With the United States, might give you more consideration how to use their economic and cultural advantages, expand their market shares and living space. But with China, I think globalization is draw the practice and experience of the United States and shares the fruits of internationalization and marketization. However, as a Chinese scholar, I will think China is inevitably concerned about the lost itself. So I want to think, I often think, what is internationalization? Who is the international? What should be the model or example? So a few decades ago, there may be only one direction. International means Americanization. So in this sense, internationalized China is simply to keep up with the United States. But I think today, the situation has changed greatly, in which the prospect of civilization and cultural diversity can only be achieved by interaction, communication, and win-win outcomes. So the first part, I want to point out one question: how to protect our own culture's self-awareness in the globalization discourse. Second part, I want to discuss self-awareness in language transplant. You know, in Shanghai, in the right hand, you can see many English training institute or group, 51 talk, and education first, and our Wall Street English, so many training group. Since in Shanghai or in China, since the reform and opening up, the major foreign language Shanghai has been learned is English. From the first grade in primary school to the graduation of doctorate, English is the compulsory testing subject for every major assessment. Along with language learning, I think it influences on the way of thinking and outlook, which is inherent in its language. However, I think during the entire learning process, several places in China, taking Shanghai as an example, overlook the Chinese education and unique Chinese way of thinking to varying degrees. So in this presentation, I will introduce the characteristic of Chinese thinking connected with language. This is a picture. There's a bat and deer, there's two animals. I think language is deeply rooted in the soil of culture and history. Chinese characters are pictograph and ideograph. So a bat and a deer appearing in the same time on a painting do not simply mean combination of two animals, but represented a blessing of good fortune and good luck. Why this? Bat, in Chinese words we say 蝙蝠. Deer, in Chinese words we say 鹿. This is the same pronunciation as happiness, as fortune. So, combination bat and deer in Chinese words we means good luck. So I think it is a very different thinking ways about Western culture or English. Next good example, in wedding tradition, friends will give a pocket of gift which is full of jujubes, peanuts, logans, and lotus seeds. Means conceiving and giving birth to a baby soon. So, we can say the meaning of hieroglyphs can be speculated through forms and sounds. While an English way of thinking, there is no cause and effect relation between the four foods and giving birth to a baby. So, this is a characteristic of Chinese language. I think this is self-awareness, and I think it has great influence in thinking, in religious, in literature, in art. So, my real point is the differences in thinking modes leads to a difference between Chinese and Western culture. Chinese people use characters as hieroglyphs, tend to be more visualized in terms of way of thinking. They can use logic regarding forms and sounds to associate two things which have nothing to do with each other. English, however, is about alphabet, and its meaning cannot be speculated directly. It infers more abstract things, a way of thinking from superficial to the profound. So, So I think the language-based pictograph is very different from the Western culture. I think it is important for Chinese people to learn our own language and appreciate the charm of Chinese, which is the essential part of forming a sense of history. This will give an example about Hong Kong and Singapore. So I think the best way of expressing one's thoughts and feelings is through his mother tongue, no matter how well he speaks other language, though this mother tongue may not be understood. So I think the relationship foreign language and mother language is my viewpoint. Compared to the mother tongue, foreign language are the adapter. However, the power is the culture we can in the blood of our own countries, which is our root. I think Americans are confident in their roots, in their language. So do Chinese people. To learn and understand the culture of others, not to lose itself. Rather, I think it is to achieve a better self. Third part. So I think we should looking for objectivity and self-awareness in cross-cultural communication. I think the real purpose of cross-cultural communication between China and America is to look for and confirm each other's characteristics. Then we will be able to learn more about ourselves and each other. Because we know about others, we have the talent of using language other people know, the text other people write, and the logical other people understand, to express their own language, own opinion, own meaningful word. So I think the outcome of cross-cultural communication is not to make ourselves the same as others, but to tell others in a way other people could understand how we are different to each other. Therefore, we can come back to the internationalization. Internationalization is to find out the way that other people could understand you. And it's a means, not an end. To find out the way that other people understand you requires a broad range of knowledge, objectivity, and rational judgment of values. So we should open ourselves and sustain our specialties. So we come back to the Starbucks coffee. People who buy coffee at Starbucks, I think it does not necessarily mean that they think Starbucks make outstanding coffee. But they might know all about Starbucks even before they enter the cafe. When it is cold and raining outside, no matter where you are, Jerusalem, London, Hong Kong, Shanghai, you know you can order a cup of coffee and a bagel from Starbucks. At the next block, we see the familiar light, though you are totally new to the city. But for me, I personally prefer to meet friends in tea houses or restaurant in Shanghai where I could feel the sense of home I miss. So I think the internationalization to open ourselves to let any kind of Starbucks come in, to make ourselves aware of how to make our coffee tea and coffee more tasty, and to let others learn about our uniqueness. So the more the Starbucks are, the more important the tea houses are in every single city of China. For do this, for you have the viewpoints or your suggestion, the viewpoints, I think it's essential to eliminate bias consciously during cross-cultural communication and interaction. The 4 pictures, the different culture, different people, different places. So I think there is no rule that could apply to everything, and exception always exists. We should dispel the bias all the time and conduct field observation. So in the everyday life or the theoretical research, we always judge other people according to our standards and predisposition. Cross-cultural communication, strength and internationalization is a practical event to take off the labels and to interact face-to-face, which is much better back-to-back. So objectivity means down any obvious and subtle hostility of the culture. Diversity will not result in separation. And I think it is normal that cultures varied. The correct understanding and implementation of tolerance, not a burden, so we should respect minority group of people regardless of origin, nation, religion, family background, gender, and sexual orientations. and it is particularly important to cross-cultural communication. So, brief conclusion. I think 3 aspects we should play a crucial role in cross-cultural communication today, which are: first, deal with thinking and conscious and self-respect. Second, deal with learning from other cultures and be confident in our own. Third, to deal with the preference of values and rational objectivity. That's all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. At the very outset, I would like to thank, in particular, Dr. Huang, Dr. Megan Keita and his colleagues, Brian Crable, and others for inviting me this afternoon to speak to you all. Special thanks also to the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. I had the pleasure of visiting their campus in 2012. And also I want to thank all the students who are here. I hope you're getting more than extra credit by being here. And I'll try my best to make it meaningful to you in the 15 minutes or so that I have. Saturday afternoon after lunch, when I teach my classes after lunch, students keep complaining. So I tell them it's too early to begin until 11 o'clock, and then it's lunch break, and then it's post-lunch, so when do we actually have time to teach? But anyway, switching gears from international understanding to corporate social responsibility. Since 2005, my students and I have conducted studies in a few countries. We began with Singapore in 2005, and I will present just a couple of slides from that. And over the years, we have conducted studies in Italy. Now two are conducting studies in the Netherlands. We also did a couple of studies in Switzerland, and one in China with a colleague of mine from Shanghai Jiaotong University. All on perceptions and practices of CSR among a range of organizations. The Singapore study was basically centered around corporations, large corporations. Since then, I have taken a particular interest in small and medium enterprises, and I think that's particularly relevant to the topic that I want to focus on today, which is basically religion and how it affects, or how it may affect CSR. And I will present only 2 slides from the Singapore study and 2 slides from the study from Italy. Oh, it's still me, narcissist. Something is wrong. We begin with the definition. I'm not going to read it completely. If you're interested, then I can send you the PowerPoint slides. I knew students would be here, so I decided just to put up the definition so that we are all on the same page. I just want to point to Global Compact, which was begun in 2000 by then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. It was launched in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and basically it was a voluntary effort to get corporations to focus on these 4 principles, human rights, labor standards, the environment, and anti-corruption. And from that, we move on to the research questions that have driven most of my studies, again with my students. Essentially, we looked at perceptions of executives with regard to CSR. What did they perceive CSR to be? How did they define it? Had they heard the term at all? And what did they think of it when the term CSR was given to them? By the way, the 2 studies we did in Switzerland centered around 2 of the leading industries that come to mind when the term, word association. If I say Switzerland, what would you say? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Chocolate. Okay. What's the next thing that comes to mind? Banking. And the third?
Chocolate.
Chocolate is one already. So watches. Swiss watches, right? And so what we ended up doing was look at the luxury watch industry in Switzerland and their CSR practices, as well as the CSR practices of the banking sector in Switzerland, especially the corporate foundations that are linked to the banking sector. So what we also looked at were specific activities that were performed in the name of CSR in this range of the big corporations as well as the small and medium enterprises. I will only, as I said, present to you 2 slides from the Singapore study and 2 slides from the study in Italy. What are the motivations behind CSR practices in Singapore? I won't go through all of it. As you can see, enhanced reputation, enhancing community trust and support, long-term sustainability, increase in profits. These are the things that seem to be predominant in the minds of these corporate executives when we ask them. When it comes to drivers of CSR in the Singapore study, these were some of the drivers. Government, NGO, mass media, corporations, trade associations, consumers, employees. As you can see, these are all lumped together as most of them are organizations in their own rights. When it comes to employees, of course, you're talking about individual people. This is all important later on when I start talking about religion. In the Italian study, which was a study that we did in 2012, again, SMEs, small and medium enterprises only, based on the OECD definition of small, medium, and micro. As you can see, the motivations were improving public welfare, but then you also have such things as enhanced reputation, and so on. So CSR is still a very, what you call a strategically oriented activity for most corporations. So they see it as part of strategy. Here were some of the drivers of CSR in the Italian study. So again, large organizations. Now, the point I'm trying to make based on these 2 quick studies or representing these 2 studies is we are always talking about groups, about organizations. When it comes to the drivers of CSR, we are not really talking about the individual, because all of these are made of individuals. And what are the individual values that we have? What are the individual morals that drive CSR? Is it all about very strategically thinking how does this affect or help the reputation of my organization? The theme of my talk basically is that there are certain key factors that drive how individuals look at CSR. And I believe that religion is one theme that has really not been looked at all. And what a setting to talk about religion, right? Villanova University. And it may very well be that a lot of the literature in CSR has been generated by Western cultures, where obviously there is a penchant for separation of church and state, but is there really a separation of church and state in the United States? It's open to a lot of debate, isn't it? If you look back at the discussions that are happening on various issues, social and otherwise, during the current campaign, for example, in the United States. So I believe that religion plays a huge role, and you don't have to be religious to be affected by it. You don't even have to follow any faith, because at the end of the day we operate in society, and whether or not we believe in religion, many of the choices that are made at the societal level could be influenced by that, and that has a bearing on how we conduct our own activities in the organization and outside of it. Given my background as an Indian, I thought, let me talk a little bit about Hindu philosophy or Hindu religion. I'm not going to give you a treatise on Hindu religion. I'm just only going to talk about two concepts and tell you how that affected the CSR activities of one of the well-known companies in India. There are these two concepts of dharma and karma, which we get from Indian scriptures. Dharma or Sanatana Dharma, as it is described in the scriptures, includes not only religious duties but also the moral rights and duties of each individual. So Dharma actually sets apart specific duties that individuals should perform in order to be worthy members of a society. So values such as truthfulness, non-injury, generosity, they all come under the dharma. And karma, basically, which is, it sounds like dharma, but in the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the ancient scriptures of India, there is a distinction that's made between dharma and karma, karma being the action with cause and effect. I think it has also seeped into some of the Western parlance. You have heard of karma, right? Many times we say, oh, that was karma. So it can either be good or bad. Essentially, it is if you do good deeds and you accumulate good karma, then good things will happen to you. So it's that kind of a barter. So a man turns into something good by good action, and then if you have bad actions, then you become bad. One of the scriptures from southern India called Tirukkural, which is in Tamil, around the 2nd century BC it was written. It says dharma or responsibility of a leader. Here they're talking about leadership in society. He is to administer justice and protect subjects, and by doing so the leader or the ruler becomes divine. This is the divine right theory of kings, if you wish. So that's a very quick primer into what's an extremely complex religion, if you want, or philosophy, which is Hinduism. Based on that, what we did was my graduate student Neva Stumberger and I, we got a very small grant from the Arthur Page Center. Dr. Lani mentioned it earlier. We got about $8,000 to do a small study on CSR perceptions in India and Slovenia. For those of you who know Slovenia, which is a former Yugoslav republic, it's, you can call, quite distant from religion, most of them. Neva, who is a native Slovenian, tells me that there may just be about 12 or 15% of the Slovenian population that calls itself as church going, defining it as maybe once a month or once in 2 months going to church. Whereas you have, on the contrary, the culture of India, which is very much steeped in religion. So we wanted to see how things are between these two, what we call as, diverse cultures. So we were looking at the micro level, which is the impact of religion on individual values, and this is only with regard to CSR. Given that CSR, in our view, should be all about altruism, giving back to the community and so on, doing good, good karma, if you will. At the meso level, we said how individual values are negotiated in organizational context. As I said earlier, we can't simply say, oh, I'm not religious, so religion doesn't affect me. It could very well affect you if the head of the organization that you are a part of is religious and sets a certain culture within the organization. At the macro level, of course, this is the collectivity of organizations, which is society at large, and how at the societal level CSR is perceived and practiced and what one gets in return for that. So that's really the foundation for this study. Again, I don't have too much time, and so here are just a few preliminary findings. We are still doing some of the interviews and so on. And at least so far, based on the couple of dozen of interviews that we have done in Slovenia, they don't link any of their CSR activities to religion or religious beliefs. This was to be expected, but this is a program of study. We are going to do some more in the future because, and this is where my student Neva and I disagree. She thinks this is it, this finding. And I keep telling her this is not it. There has got to be more. They may not be aware of how religion is affecting them. So that's a constant discussion between her and I. And to her credit, she is willing to explore, and that's what she is doing for her dissertation. So, whereas Indians seem to attribute a predominant amount of their CSR to various religious beliefs, whether or not they consider themselves to be religious. And this is where I just want to bring the concept of, or the notion of explicit and implicit CSR. Explicit being more overt. There's this whole body of knowledge in communication called CSR communication. And to me, that's an oxymoron, because I think CSR has to be altruistic, and you don't go about trumpeting the good deeds that you did. Of course, that's a very different perspective. That's not the strategic CSR perspective that most business schools teach their students. Implicit, in my view, is much more of a moral taking on CSR. And here I'm paraphrasing something from the Hindu scriptures where they say that if you do some good deed with your right hand, you give alms to somebody with your right hand, then your left hand should not know it. It rhymes very well in Sanskrit. I hope you get the idea behind it, which is when you do a good deed, don't go around trumpeting it. Whereas the whole notion of CSR communication really basically is you're getting, earlier I showed you those slides about CSR for corporate reputation and the like. Okay, I think my time is almost up, and Dr. Keita has been generous. So, what are the takeaways from this discussion? I'm not here to present answers. Now we all have to work, including the extra credit students. So I'm posing some questions which I hope also provide some answers in terms of how I view CSR and the relationship between religion and CSR. By the way, I stayed away from spirituality because I knew there wasn't enough time to do it. So I make a distinction between religion and spirituality, but we will, maybe another time we can deal with it. So here are some takeaways. Are we too focused on the strategic or instrumental activities of CSR? The way I have framed them, I hope, gives you the answer from my side, but hopefully during discussion, I want to hear from your side. And are we forgetting that the drivers of CSR, and remember I showed these earlier to you from the two studies, while they are organizations, they're activist groups, the government, and so on, are they not driven by individuals who are making decisions on behalf of the organization? In other words, personal values of those leaders are definitely influencing how those organizations are driving CSR in society. And then I ask, and earlier this morning also, our colleague is not here, that's why I probed a little bit about where the value systems in China come from, the morals. Okay, there's no religion, but where else does it come? It's not all Confucianism, and even if it is, well, what's the difference between religion and a Confucian thought? because in Hinduism they say the scriptures came from Brahma himself, one of the gods. So, well, at the end, it comes from somewhere. So, what's the source of value systems, morals, ethics for different societies? And what do we call those sources? And as I've been saying, is one influenced by religion only if one consciously says one is following a particular religious faith, or are we influenced even outside of it? And finally, how would the discussion about and debate about CSR change, if at all, if we also brought religion into the discussion? There is so little that mentions religion, the CSR literature. It's very few and far between. And I'm simply amazed that something that is so present in many of these societies where the literature has evolved is oblivious to that aspect of it. With that, I conclude my talk. Thank you for being so patient and very attentive as well.
Two very interesting presentations. One of the things that I have as a takeaway and that you might want to think about is this question of reflection on a kind of self-awareness. One self-awareness is around issues of culture. Another is around issues of corporate responsibility. What are the roles of individuals in this space? How they formulate ideas that are corporate, that relate to these notions, and how do these notions stem out of, in effect, Dr. Huang's remarks, culture, morals, religion, spirituality, what have you. So let's open the floor for questions. Are there any questions, please? Yes, please.
Thank you guys for your presentations. So my name is Peter. I'm one of Joel Osher's Chinese students. And this question is more directed toward the first presentation. So I'm going to ask the question in English and then Chinese as well after. So in terms of understanding different cultures, so if we take the United States and China as an example, do you believe when communicating, one side has a more difficult time communicating with the other? So in Chinese, this would be 如果是美国和中国和他们两个就是互相想明白别的他们的文化，你觉得中国还是美国会有更多难处 So it's so yeah, that's my question. So
I will answer your question in Chinese because Chinese is my mother tongue. So I emphasize on I love the beautiful Chinese. So I answer the question in Chinese.
okay.
Just take it in the hand.
我觉得这是一个怎么说呢，不是特别容易回答的问题。因为就是说，从美国和中国来说，我们对它进行文化比较的时候，我们每个人站的立场是有差异的。
So when we make a comparison between the cultures, we stand a different stance.
如果从那个1775年，从那个瓦特发明蒸汽机到现在的接近200多年的这个历史当中，美国通过1次大战、2次大战，它始终是文化上全世界最强势的国家。
So since 1775, when water invented something, and 错大的我
蒸汽机。
steam, okay, and then Americans through the First War and the Second War, they always run for the top in culture.
而对于从就是逐步发展起来的这个中国来说的话，它在历史当中的命运一直是在追赶发达国家。
So during these almost 200 years, the Chinese
所以呢，就是现在的中国人或多或少都会有一种文化上没有那么自信的感觉。
Now Chinese more or less lost their confidence in culture.
但是我觉得今天要感谢这个全球化的进程，使得不同的文化样式，甚至是有那个时间上差异的文化样式，放在了同一个平台上进行交流和学习。
Thanks to globalization, now no matter what kind of culture, we understand the same level, even behind, we just beyond the time, old and new, we stand the same level.
那么，中国这30年来经济的发展，那个世界上多元文化的交流，使我们逐渐感觉到，能够活得像我们自己一样，活得像自己，我们觉得更加重要，而不是跟别人活得一样，或者是我们向别人看齐，像我们自己就 OK 了。
Now through the 30 years and the fast development of the economics in China, and we realized we have to live by ourselves. We don't need to compare to others. We don't need to be exactly like others. We don't need to catch up with others. The important things, we live our own life, our style.
所以我的一个总的看法是，对中国来说，这个文化往下发展可能是要困难一些，但是这个困难就是魅力所在。
And in the globalization these days, maybe development like a Chinese culture have a less difficult to develop, but that's because we have a very attraction here. Because we are difficult, so we think that is something attractive.
所以总的来说，我的一个观点是，在全球化的进程中，文明将越来越走向一致，而文化将越来越多样，这是我的观点。
Now, in the globalization today, I believe civilization will become more similarity, but culture will more like diversity. Thank you.
谢谢 Thank you.
Sriramesh, to pick up on your religion and altruism questions. From what we know of, looking back at the way we think about culture, right? So we can look at Tocqueville about Durkheim and all the way through Weber and all these different dichotomies and among Stradbeck and the values that underlie a culture, right? That foundation and how they're shaped so significantly by religion, whether we buy into religion or not, right? So I would definitely say that religion is not something somebody has to buy into to influence by. That said, then the question of CSR comes often to, well, is it altruism or is it economic, right? And Robert Axelrod would say there is no such thing as altruism.
And so does Milton Friedman.
Right, exactly. So that we cooperate because it's good for us, and we are good to other people because it makes us happy or we get something out of it. That said, I don't know if you saw the article this week on Coca-Cola. There's an article in the New York Times that came out this week about the $120 million that it has spent on research, especially on child obesity research, about several $1 million just on child obesity research, and of course the article is taking Coca-Cola to task on its perhaps conflict of interest, which it says, oh no, we're not doing that. And I wanted to give you a chance to comment on Coca-Cola's CSR in light of altruism, etc.
Well, I think by now you know that I'm very cynical about such. It's not just Coca-Cola that does that. There are those kinds of what I would say paradoxes in many such instances. Will they stop selling to the youth? No. Their competitor Pepsi calls itself, in terms of product differentiation, Pepsi is the choice of a new generation, right? And it has been since the 80s when they had Michael Jackson as the brand ambassador those days, and then Britney Spears and every new, young star who comes up. So I think that it's just a ploy. At least that's my take on it. It's basically they want to appear to be socially conscious. To me, if they stopped selling to the youth, or they said, I don't know how you can do this, but it will be like alcohol then, right? At the end of the day, maybe they should stop producing the product itself and go into a different product. But I'm extremely cynical about those things. I think at the end of the day, it is just oriented toward building a reputation that they are socially responsible. But with regard to your earlier comment about the definition of CSR itself, I think because it has been defined, well, remember, CSR as a concept of study, it's very young. However, CSR practices have been much, much older. So was there no CSR before we got all these definitions, whether you study Carroll from the 1970s or whoever? And most of them are from Western culture. So the definition of CSR has been very much, in my view, oriented or influenced by those cultural norms. And this is why in the past, even in public relations, when I've talked about ethnocentricity and how all the experiences have been based, the body of knowledge has relied heavily on Western experiences, I have offended many of my friends and colleagues from the West in the audience for critiquing that. And I think there's some justification in their being offended by it, because then I tell myself, okay, I'm from India, or we are from other parts of the world. What have we done to bring our traditions into the mix? And so I think my program of research here at least is going in that direction, to see how can we enrich this. Why should we, when we talk about ethics or morality, it's reasonable to talk about Socrates, Aristotle and so on, those rules. But we have had ancient cultures, China, India and so on, that of course were not immoral societies. So the problem is we meaning the natives of those cultures, have not brought that wisdom or those traditions. And I think that's the challenge I keep expressing to multicultural audiences, to say, let us go back to our roots and see how we can enrich the body of knowledge. So it's not so much a criticism against the scholars of the West, it's more a criticism about ourselves, that we are following rather than leading. And I like Dr. Kaifeng's remarks in that regard now, when she said it's better to also lead. Does that answer your question? We have, I forget your name, and then you. And
now it's twofold based on the last question. I have another question.
To whom?
To you. Dr.
Sriramesh.
I oversaw what I always like to call corporate outreach at ESPN, giving back, and doing so because we wanted to do so, not because we had to. And then corporate social responsibility came into vogue, and I feel that it applies more to environmental standards, labor standards, so on, social responsibility versus charitable work. And I'm still wrestling with these things. So ESPN's first 5 years, anything we did in the community to help the community, whether it was building homes or giving money or volunteers or whatever, I took my own Christian values of not promoting what we were doing. I said, we are not going to promote, and then you talk about that, the right hand and the right, that we were not going to promote what we were doing. We wanted to do this. And what happened was we were actually criticized. The community thought we were not engaged. And we found that we were forced to have to promote what we were doing in order to show that we were engaged. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, thank you. There are many forms of engagement. This is not the only engagement that you can have with the community, right?
Right.
So why should only this particular giving back be the be all and end all of your display of being engaged. That's my response. Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Dr. Ralph Carozza. I am actually a student here at Villanova. I study languages through their personal enrichment program. So I audit these languages, including Mandarin. I've been in practice for about 30 years as a chiropractic doctor, and I have found that over the years, my patients who have a strong faith, regardless of what it is, they believe in something larger than themselves, their prognosis is always much better. They seem to not get sick as often. They heal faster. So I just wanted to contribute that.
Absolutely. I mean, we are in the same on the same page as far as that is. I think it's a way of life. Faith is a way. I'm not here to preach that you must become religious. That's why I said I actually had a few slides about spirituality, because I make a distinction between the two. I think humans are spiritual beings. All of a sudden people are laughing. I said, what am I? Well, it's my computer. It'll go away when we are done. So I agree with you. I think it's a way of life. It's a whole. I practice yoga. Of course, now it has become a fashion. But I was practicing it when it was not fashionable. And meditation and so on. So I have myself seen how it has changed me and how I interact. Earlier I made a comment about emotional intelligence, basically for that reason. So these things also help you in terms of grounding you in a certain emotion of the self, of the other, and the environment, the three levels.
We'll take one more question. Yes, in the back.
Hi, my name is Kimberly. I'm also one of Joash's students. And so this question is for Dr. Huang. So again, I'll say it in English and then I'll ask you in Chinese. So in the article, it talked about how when China advances technologically, it seems to almost assimilate to Western culture. So my question is, what are ways China can advance without seeming to assimilate to Western culture? So 西方社会是一个科技高度发达的社会，中国在各方面也越来越接近西方社会。中国有什么办法保持自己的特色，而同时成为一个先进的国家？
这个很好的问题啊。对中国来说，其实这是一个难题，是一个 paradox。我认为是一个悖论吧。就像我们每个人一样，我们希望被整个的就是被整个的人群认可，但是同时我们又希望我们活得像自己，这本身是一个非常矛盾的事情。
So we want to be recognized and be a friend of the as group, but also we want to keep our own identity as individual. That is also difficult.
但是总的来说，我的一个观点是，我们每个人的个性，我们每个人的活出来的特色，实际上恰恰是在跟社会、跟整个人群认同的过程当中获得的。
So in sum up, I believe when we live the style our own self, then we will recognize by the group too.
那对中国来说的话，就是在互联网技术，在整个的那个工业技术的创新，那以及在这个整个的一个管理模式上，我觉得我们还继续要向西方发达国家学习。
So like the online internet skill and other high technology, we will learn from the Western side.
这个教授呢，早上跟我聊天的时候有说到，比如说 Starbucks 和那个 Tea House 怎么样能够 mixed 合起来，是要用在那个茶室当中，我们可以提供 WiFi， 可以提供一个大家交流的场所，然后呢，使我们的年轻人既享受 Tea House 的那种生活，但是同时呢，又像 Starbucks 一样有它的现代的气息， 这就是一种融合。
Yeah, in the morning I talked with Dr.
Sriramesh.
Sweden, and we talk about Starbucks, coffee, and Chinese tea house. Because Chinese in the tea house have a Wi-Fi, so like young people enjoy the tea while use the high technology as Wi-Fi.
所以我觉得传统和现代在我们朝向未来的这种建设当中，通过一个一个的具体的案例，通过一个一个具体的行为来实现个性和共性的统一。
Now he's like during the process and the modernization and how to keep the traditional. I think the case by case lets us solve one case by another case problem, so we can be something hold in common. Also, we keep our own identity.
总的来说，我的一个观点就是，这个特色或者说个性，并不是一个把别人都隔绝开来的一个例外，而是融入别人的这个共性当中，才能获得自己的存在。
So uniqueness and